All right, so today we're going to tackle one of the most common sexual health concerns out there for men, premature ejaculation. We're going to get into what it is, what causes it, and maybe most importantly, how it's treated, all based on what science is telling us right now.
So let's just dive right in with the biggest question on everyone's mind. The word premature. It can feel really subjective, right? Maybe even a little judgmental. But when you get into a clinical setting, the definitions are actually pretty specific. So where is that line? What really counts as premature?
Okay, so the most widely used definition really boils down to two key things. First, there's a time frame. We're talking about ejaculation happening within about 1 minute of penetration. But, and this is just as important, there's a personal side to it. It happens before the person wants it to, and it's causing them real distress.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. You see, the clinical definitions are super strict. 1 minute, or in some cases, even just 15 seconds. But the reality for most guys, it's way different. The average time is somewhere between 4 and 8 minutes. And this context is so important because it just shows you how big the gap is between a diagnosable condition and, the totally normal, wide spectrum of human experience.
So if the definitions are that specific, you're probably wondering, okay, how many people does this actually affect? Well, understanding just how common it is huge because the numbers might honestly surprise you, and they really help get rid of that feeling of being alone with this.
So, get this. Study after study comes to the same conclusion. This affects somewhere between 20 to 30% of men. Just think about that for a second. That's roughly 1 out of every 4 men. That makes it by far the most common male sexual dysfunction.
And here's where we bust a huge myth. A lot of people just assume this is a young guy's problem, something you grow out of. But the data, it tells a totally different story. The numbers stay incredibly steady throughout life. We're talking nearly a third of men under 60, and it's still affecting over 20% of men well into their 80s.
And this really gets to the heart of it. This is why a stopwatch never tells the whole story. The real impact here, it's emotional. It can spin up this whole cycle of anxiety and embarrassment that puts a real strain on relationships. For some, it gets to a point where they just start avoiding intimacy altogether, just to escape that feeling.
So what is actually going on here? Why does this happen? Well, our whole understanding has done a complete 180, moving away from all these old psychological blame games and toward a modern focus on straight-up biology.
You can really see that evolution in thinking right here. For decades, it was all chalked up to psychology. Performance anxiety, bad habits you picked up as a teen, stuff like that. And look, while psychology definitely can play a role, our modern understanding, especially for the lifelong condition, is really rooted in physiology. We're now looking at things like serotonin receptors in the brain, genetic factors, and even just heightened physical sensitivity.
Now, the really good news is that this huge shift toward biology has opened up some brand new and really effective ways to treat this. So let's jump into the main strategies for gaining more control, which, by the way, often work best when you combine them.
All right, one of the go-to methods you'll hear about is a behavioral therapy called the stop-start technique. The whole idea is basically to retrain your body and brain to recognize that feeling you get right before the point of no return. So by hitting pause right before climax, waiting for that sensation to fade, and then starting again, you can gradually build up a much better sense of control over your body's reflexes. Okay, so beyond those behavioral techniques, there are also some really effective medical options in the toolbox. SSRIs, which are a type of antidepressant, actually work on a brain level. They change how your body uses serotonin, which is a key player in the whole ejaculatory reflex. Then you've got topical anesthetics, which are much more direct. They just reduce sensitivity. And of course, psychotherapy can be a game changer for tackling the anxiety and relationship stress that often comes with this. In a lot of cases, the magic happens when you combine these approaches.
Now, you might stumble across some information about surgical options. They are out there, and they're performed in some parts of the world. But this is super important. Major international medical groups do not recommend these procedures. And the reason is simple. The risks, which include things like permanent nerve damage or even a total loss of sexual function, are just considered way too high.
And finally, to really get a grip on where we are today, it is fascinating to look back at how our view of this has changed so dramatically. I mean, what we now see as a medical condition, it wasn't always seen as a problem at all.
This whole progression, it tells such a wild story. Back in the 40s, the famous Kinsey report actually framed rapid ejaculation as a good thing, a sign of masculine vigor.
Then, not long after, Freud's theories completely flipped the script, calling it a psychological problem rooted in some unconscious anger. It wasn't until the 1970s that pioneers like Masters and Johnson brought in practical therapies. And that journey brings us all the way to today, where the whole conversation is centered on medicine and neurobiology.
And all of this leads to the biggest takeaway here. When we change our thinking about something like this, when it stops being a moral failing and becomes a treatable medical condition, it does so much more than just help one person. It removes the shame and stigma for everyone. It opens the door for more honest conversations about function, pleasure, and what satisfaction really means for both partners. So the real question it leaves us with is this. As science gives us more and more answers, are we finally ready to have a better, more open conversation about what sexual well-being truly means for all of us?
All right, so today we're going to tackle one of the most common sexual health